Hey everyone, it's Alex, and I am back with another awards nominations video, this time concerning the 69th Annual BAFTA Awards. Now, most of you might not know about the BAFTAs because they're the only major award show during awards season that does not take place in the United States. The BAFTAs take place in Great Britain. They're basically the British version of the Oscars. And it pretty much works the same way as the Oscars. The BAFTA stands for British Academy of Film and Television Arts. And like the Oscars, it has about 6,200 or so voters, and the voters vote on everything from production design, cinematography, acting, directing, writing, etc., just like the Oscars. And the BAFTAs, while they can often diverge from the Oscars in terms of nominations and wins, a lot of times they do parallel the Oscar nominations and wins, which is why for an awards buff like me, it can be an important awards show to look at in terms of trying to predict the Oscars, because the Oscars are always last on the schedule. So before I get into the nominations, I just want to highlight some unique categories that the BAFTAs have that every other awards show don't. Since the BAFTAs take place in Britain, one of the categories they have is for Outstanding British Film. And by British film, that basically means a film that is directed or produced by someone who's British. It doesn't necessarily have to be set in Britain or be about British people. It just has to have been made by British people. And then there's Outstanding Debut by a British writer, director, or producer. And then there's also the special Rising Star Award. Now, the Rising Star Award is most unique because it's the only category in the BAFTAs that is not voted on by the BAFTA members. The Rising Star Award is actually chosen through online polling by the public. And this is the only formal award show that does that, because usually award shows where winners are determined through online public voting are usually award shows that tend to favor movies that are more popular but not necessarily highly critically acclaimed, like the People's Choice Awards, the MTV Movie Awards, the Teen Choice Awards, etc., etc. So those are some of the ways in which the BAFTAs stand out as an award show. Now it's time to see who they nominated among the best films of 2015. And here are the nominees for the 69th BAFTA Awards. Best Art Direction: Bridge of Spies, production design by Adam Stockhausen, set decoration by Rena D'Angelo. Carol, production design by Judy Becker, set decoration by Heather Leffler. Mad Max Fury Road, production design by Colin Gibson, set decoration by Lisa Thompson. The Martian, production design by Arthur Max, set decoration by Celia Boback. Star Wars Episode 7: The Force Awakens, production design by Rick Carter and Darren Guilford, set decoration by Lee Sandales. Best Cinematography: Janusz Kaminski, Bridge of Spies. Ed Lachman, Carol. John Seal, Mad Max Fury Road. Emmanuel Lubezki, The Revenant. Roger Deakins, Sicario. Best Costume Design: Odile Dix-Miro, Brooklyn. Sandy Powell, Carol. Sandy Powell, Cinderella. Paco Delgado, The Danish Girl. Jenny Bevan, Mad Max Fury Road. Best Editing: Hank Corwin, The Big Short. Michael Kahn, Bridge of Spies. Margaret Sixel, Mad Max Fury Road. Pietro Scalia, The Martian. Stephen Mirioni, The Revenant. Best Makeup and Hair: Morna Ferguson and Lorraine Glynn, Brooklyn. Jerry DiCarlo and Patricia Regan, Carol. Jan Sewell, The Danish Girl. Leslie Vanderwalt and Damian Martin, Mad Max Fury Road. Sean Grigg, Duncan Jarman, and Robert Pandini, The Revenant. Best Score: Thomas Newman, Bridge of Spies. Ennio Morricone, The Hateful Eight. Ryuichi Sakamoto and Karsten Nikolai, The Revenant. Johan Johansson, Sicario. John Williams, Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens. Best Sound: Drew Coonan, Richard Hims, Andy Nelson, and Gary Rydstrom, Bridge of Spies. Scott Hecker, Chris Jenkins, Mark Mangini, Ben Osmo, Greg Rudloff, and David White, Mad Max Fury Road. Paul Massey, Mac Ruth, Oliver Tarney, and Mark Taylor, The Martian. Lon Bender, Chris Dusterdiak, Martin Hernandez, Frank A. Montano, John Taylor, and Randy Tom, The Revenant. David Accord, Andy Nelson, Christopher Scarabozio, Matthew Wood, and Stuart Wilson, Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens. Best Visual Effects: Jake Morrison, Greg Steele, Dan Sudik, and Alex Wutke, Ant-Man. Mark Ardington, Sarah Bennett, Paul Norris, and Andrew Whitehurst, Ex Machina. Andrew Jackson, Dan Oliver, Tom Wood, and Andy Williams, Mad Max Fury Road. Chris Lawrence, Tim Ledbury, Richard Stammers, and Stephen Warner, The Martian. Chris Corbold, Roger Guyett, Paul Cavanaugh, and Neil Scanlon, Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens. Best Animated Short Film: Edmund, Nina Gantz, and Emily Geoffroy. Mono Man, Simon Cartwright and Camilla Christiane Hodol. Prologue: Richard Williams and Imogen Sutton. Best Live Action Short Film: Elephant, Nick Helm, Alex Moody, and Esther Smith. Mining Poems or Odes, Callum Rice and Jack Cocker. Operator, Caroline Bartley and Rebecca Morgan. Over, Jorn Threlfall and Jeremy Bannister. Samuel 613, Billy Lumbey and Cheyenne Conway. Best Documentary Film: Amy, Asif Kapadia and James Gay Reese. Cartel Land, Matthew Heineman and Tom Yellen. He Named Me Malala, Davis Guggenheim, Walter Parks, and Laurie McDonald. Listen to Me Marlin, Stephen Riley, John Batsek, George Chignell, and R.J. Cutler. Sherpa, Jennifer Peetham, Bridget Eichen, and John Smithson. Best Foreign Language Film: The Assassin from Taiwan, directed by Ho Xiao-Hsien. Force Majeure from Sweden, directed by Ruben Ostlund. Thebe from Jordan, directed by Naji Abu Nowar. Timbuktu from Mauritania, directed by Abderrahmane Sissako. Wild Tales from Argentina, directed by Damien Zifron. Best Animated Feature: Inside Out, Pete Docter. Minions, Pierre Coffin and Kyle Balda. Shaun the Sheep Movie, Mark Burton and Richard Starzak. Outstanding British Film: Amy, Brooklyn, The Danish Girl, Ex Machina, 45 Years, The Lobster. Outstanding Debut by a British writer, director, or producer: Ex Machina, Alex Garland. Second Coming, Debbie Tucker-Green. The Survivalist, Stephen Fingleton. A Syrian Love Story, Sean McAllister and Elhum Shakarafar. Thebe, Naji Abu Nowar and Rupert Lloyd. Best Original Screenplay: Matt Charman, Ethan Cohen, and Joel Cohen, Bridge of Spies. Alex Garland, Ex Machina. Quentin Tarantino, The Hateful Eight. Josh Cooley, Pete Docter, and Meg LaFauve, Inside Out. Tom McCarthy and Josh Singer, Spotlight. Best Adapted Screenplay: Adam McKay and Charles Randolph, The Big Short, based on the book by Michael Lewis. Nick Hornby, Brooklyn, based on the novel by Colm Toybeen. Phyllis Naj, Carol, based on the novel The Price of Salt by Patricia Highsmith. Emma Donahue, Room, based on her own novel. Aaron Sorkin, Steve Jobs, based on the book by Walter Isaacson. The Rising Star Award: John Boyega, Taron Egerton, Dakota Johnson, Brie Larson, Belle Powley. Best Supporting Actor: Christian Bale, The Big Short; Benicio del Toro, Sicario; Idris Elba, Beasts of No Nation; Mark Ruffalo, Spotlight; Mark Rylance, Bridge of Spies. Best Supporting Actress: Jennifer Jason Leigh, The Hateful Eight; Rooney Mara, Carol; Alicia Vikander, Ex Machina; Julie Walters, Brooklyn; Kate Winslet, Steve Jobs. Best Actor: Bryan Cranston, Trumbo; Matt Damon, The Martian; Leonardo DiCaprio, The Revenant; Michael Fassbender, Steve Jobs; Eddie Redmayne, The Danish Girl. Best Actress: Cate Blanchett, Carol; Brie Larson, Room; Saoirse Ronan, Brooklyn; Maggie Smith, The Lady in the Van; Alicia Vikander, The Danish Girl. Best Director: Adam McKay, The Big Short; Steven Spielberg, Bridge of Spies; Todd Haynes, Carol; Ridley Scott, The Martian; Alejandro Gonzalez Iñárritu, The Revenant. And finally, Best Picture, with 5 nominees. The Big Short: Dee Gardner, Jeremy Kleiner, and Brad Pitt, producers. Bridge of Spies: Christy McCosco-Krieger, Mark Platt, and Steven Spielberg, producers. Carol: Elizabeth Carlson, Christine Vacon, and Stephen Woolley, producers. The Revenant: Steve Golan, Alejandro Gonzalez Iñárritu, Arnon Milchan, Mary Parent, and Keith Redman, producers. Spotlight: Steve Golan, Bly Pagan Faust, Nicole Rockland, and Michael Sugar, producers. Alright, those are the BAFTA nominations. Now it's time for my thoughts on them. Best Art Direction: very solid for the most part. Not necessarily sure if Star Wars is some of the best art direction of the year, although it was a very phenomenal film in many ways. I honestly did not expect it to be nominated in a category like this. I mean, the sets in there are really good, and most of the stuff in the film is practical. But still, I'll admit I'm surprised that it took the place of Cinderella, The Danish Girl, or Brooklyn, because those are films you would normally expect to see in a category like Best Art Direction. But surprises are always good. Best Cinematography: pretty solid for the most part. Although I may get some hate for this, but while the cinematography in Sicario was really good, it didn't necessarily stand out to me. Now, of course, the cinematographer who shot Sicario, Roger Deakins, he's a legend in the cinematography world, but I honestly think Dariusz Wolski should have been put here for The Martian, because The Martian was just absolutely incredible to look at, and a lot of the Mars scenes were actually shot in real deserts here on Earth. So to make a Earth location look like Mars and make it look as if it were actually shot on Mars, that isn't easy to do. So I feel that deserved a little more recognition. Best Costume Design: excellent list here. I cannot complain one bit. Best Editing: again, very solid, cannot complain. Best Makeup and Hair: most of these look really good. The Danish Girl, I'm glad to see that in there. I'm surprised the Oscars did not rule it eligible for Best Makeup and Hairstyling, because the makeup on Eddie Redmayne to make him look like he's an actual woman, because his character is transgender and transitions from a man into a woman, and they just did an excellent job in that movie of making Eddie Redmayne look like a real woman, not looking like a drag queen, not looking like a comedy act. This was not done for show. This was done to make it look as real and authentic as possible. So bravo to Jan Sewell for that. Mad Max Fury Road and The Revenant, excellent nominees there. Not exactly sure about Brooklyn and Carol. I guess their makeup was okay, but it just didn't stand out really in any way. Just, maybe you know, a lot of the actresses in there have rosy cheeks at times, you know, when it's like events like winter or something, but I don't really see how that's good enough for best makeup. I mean, I guess they want some subtlety in this category, which is good, but, you know, I think this isn't the kind of subtle I was looking for, but I don't think either of those two are going to win anyway, so, yeah. Best score, this looks very good. Although I'm surprised they couldn't squeeze in either Carol or The Danish Girl, because those scores have been some of the most nominated scores by film critics circles and by other award shows throughout the season, especially the score for Carol. Beautiful score. So I'm kind of surprised that's not in there, but Bridge of Spies, that was a good score. Hateful Eight, amazing score, especially for a composer who's 87 years old, Ennio Morricone. And of course, John Williams for Star Wars The Force Awakens. John Williams, arguably the best film composer of all time, has written some of the most recognizable film scores of all time. You can't go wrong with the John Williams score, no matter what. Best Sound. So this is a bit different from the Oscars, because when I make my Oscars video, you'll see that the Oscars split sound into two categories: Best Sound Editing and Best Sound Mixing. I think the big difference there is sound editing is like how long the sounds last, whereas sound mixing is how loud or quiet the sounds are. But here this is just sound in general for length and loudness. This list is pretty solid for the most part, although I'm surprised Sicario wasn't in here, because that had some amazing sound, especially in the scenes involving drug raids or just going on the prowl. I'm surprised there aren't any musical films in here like Straight Outta Compton or Love and Mercy, because sound editors and mixers always love to throw in films that have a strong musical element to them. Best visual effects, can't complain. Even though I did not see Ant-Man, I can see why it's here, because of having to make Paul Rudd look like he's shrunk down to the size of an ant. Ex Machina, some might wonder what's that doing in there, but if you see the film, you'll see why, because Alicia Vikander's character is a robot, and you can like actually see the inside of her. And of course, Alicia Vikander is not a robot in real life, so to make her look convincing enough to be a robot while still looking human at the same time, that obviously couldn't have been easy to do, but she looked really great in that movie. And then Mad Max, The Martian, Star Wars, no surprise at all there. Glad to see all three of them there. So for Best Animated and Live Action Short Film, I can't really say anything about these because most of these short films were not released in the United States. They weren't considered eligible for the Oscars, with the exception of Prologue and Best Animated Short Film. But with Best Animated Short Film, I'm surprised neither of the Pixar short films from last year were in this category, like Lava, which played in front of Inside Out, or Sanjay's Super Team, which played in front of The Good Dinosaur. Usually a Pixar short film is always nominated for an Oscar. Best Documentary Film, I recognize 4 out of the 5. Amy, of course, that's been winning a lot of awards. And I've heard a lot about Cartel Land, He Named Me Malala, and Listen to Me Marlon. I've not heard at all of Sherpa. I don't believe that was even on the Oscar shortlist or the Oscar eligibility list even of Best Documentary Feature, so it probably hasn't been released in the United States, or at least not released in Los Angeles or New York City. For Best Foreign Language Film, this is a very interesting list because a lot of these films on here are films that were either nominated or shortlisted for the Oscars last year, like Force Majeure, which was shortlisted for the Oscar but did not get nominated. Timbuktu and Wild Tales were both nominated last year at the Oscars, but the BAFTAs, they're nominating films by the British release date schedule, so these films must have gotten released in Britain sometime in 2015, long after the Oscars were over. So because of those films being in there, there's no room for some of the other foreign films from last year that have gotten a lot of high praise and awards consideration, like Son of Saul or Mustang, but maybe those films haven't been released in the UK yet, so they're technically not eligible for this, for the BAFTA. So yeah. Best Animated Feature, Inside Out. Very glad to see that on there. Minions, the Minions was an okay movie. You know, the voice work from Sandra Bullock, John Hamm, Michael Keaton, Allison Janney, it was all fine. And the Minions themselves, you know, they were cute and funny like they always are. The film itself was only okay at best, like a 6 out of 10, because when you have the Minions as the main characters and not as just the side entertainment, the story itself doesn't have much room to grow. I mean, the story is pretty simplistic and pretty formulaic at times, but it's still entertaining. But good enough to be nominated for Best Animated Feature? No, absolutely not. It's not going to win, though. I think Inside Out is a lock to win. I still haven't seen Shaun the Sheep movie, but I'm not surprised to see it on here because Shaun the Sheep movie is actually based on a British TV show called Shaun the Sheep, obviously. I've never seen the TV show or the movie, but I know the movie has like a 99% on Rotten Tomatoes, and there's only one critic that gave it a negative review. Outstanding British Film. This list looks pretty solid, especially from the films I've actually seen on this list, which are Brooklyn, The Danish Girl, and Ex Machina. Haven't seen Amy, 45 Years, or The Lobster. The Lobster does come out sometime later this year, I don't know when, but it's going to be eligible for next year's Oscars because of its release date. Outstanding debut by a British writer, director, or producer. Not at all surprised with Ex Machina. I talked about in my Oscar video for contenders for Best Foreign Language Film, but the other 3 films in here, haven't heard of them at all. Best Original Screenplay, very solid list. Best Adapted Screenplay, solid list for the most part, although while the screenplay for Carol was excellent, I would have taken that out and swapped it with Drew Goddard's screenplay, with Drew Goddard for The Martian, because The Martian is one of those sci-fi films that before going into it, you might think, alright, this is going to be a nice little sci-fi film, but you're not at all expecting it to be that good, especially with its writing. But the writing in this movie is easily some of the best writing, not just in a science fiction film that I've ever seen, but probably some of the best writing of this whole decade. That's how good it is. And I wish the BAFTA voters had recognized that more. The Rising Star Award. This looks pretty good. John Boyega, no surprise at all, you know, especially because of his role in Star Wars. Taron Egerton, nice to see him on here. You know, Kingsman: The Secret Service. People, you know, felt that film would do pretty good, you know, because it's kind of a love letter to spy films while being its own spy film, but people didn't expect it to do as well as it did. It was a true definition of what we call a sleeper hit. So, bravo. Dakota Johnson, you know, Dakota Johnson, I think she's only on here because of how much money 50 Shades of Grey made, because as most of you know, that film was destroyed by critics. It only has like a 25% on Rotten Tomatoes, and as you'll see in my Razzie Awards video, it got a lot of nominations there, including for Dakota Johnson, spoiler alert. But of course, you know, she's become a major star thanks to that film, and she's going to be a big star for a while because of that film, and the sequels, which will be coming out next year and the year after. She's kind of like, this is exactly like 5 years ago when Kristen Stewart was nominated in this category and won, but mainly because of the popularity she had from Twilight. Because like I said, this is not voted on by the BAFTA voters, this is voted on with online polls in the general public. So we'll see what happens there. Brie Larson, glad to see her on here. You know, she hasn't really been a huge superstar. She's mainly done a lot of indie films, and she's gained some notice with her work in some of her indie films over the past few years, but Room is like the first film to really bring her to the attention of every award show. And then Belle Powley. I haven't seen any of her movies. I know she's done a lot of work in Britain and earlier this year in America. She played an American girl in a film called The Diary of a Teenage Girl, which I did not see, but I've heard it's really good. Best Supporting Actor. Didn't think I'd see Benicio del Toro in here for Sicario because he's been shut out by every other award show, so it's nice to see him in here. Mark Ruffalo for Spotlight. He was good, but I'm so glad to see Mark Rylance here for Bridge of Spies. You know, he's just absolutely phenomenal in that film. I sang his praises in my Golden Globes review. I want to see why I really love Mark Rylance's performance in Bridge of Spies. Go watch that video. Best Supporting Actress, very good for the most part, except for Julie Walters in Brooklyn. She was good in that movie, but I honestly think Helen Mirren in Trumbo and Rachel McAdams in Spotlight would have been better for that slot. Best Actor, great lineup, although especially with Matt Damon, Leonardo DiCaprio, Michael Fassbender, and Eddie Redmayne. For the fifth slot, it's actually kind of a tie for me. I'm having a hard time choosing between Bryan Cranston for Trumbo and Johnny Depp for Black Mass. I guess I'm a little more inclined towards Johnny Depp because Johnny Depp wasn't just playing James Whitey Bulger. He became James Whitey Bulger, so much so that you totally forgot you were watching an actor. Because I've read books about James Whitey Bulger, and all of his mannerisms Johnny Depp nailed perfectly. So, and as a result, he made the movie quite scary at times. But that doesn't take anything away from Bryan Cranston's performance in Trumbo, because he was excellent. He's not going to win, but I think a lot of people will be happy with his nomination. So all you Breaking Bad fans out there, Walter White is now a BAFTA nominee, or at least the actor who plays him. Best Actress. Now this is an interesting case with Alicia Vikander being a double nominee, being nominated as supporting for Ex Machina, while being nominated as lead for The Danish Girl, because her performance in The Danish Girl has been debated a lot of whether or not it's truly a lead or a supporting performance, but looks like the BAFTAs agree with the Golden Globes and they nominated her as a lead. I haven't seen The Lady in the Van, but Saoirse Ronan, Brie Larson, Cate Blanchett, all deserving of their nominations. I'm kind of surprised Jennifer Lawrence isn't in here for Joy. I know some people feel she hasn't deserved her nominations for that film and other award shows, but I really liked her in that movie. You know, Joy, I think, had a lot of the same problems I've had with a lot of other David O. Russell movies, but I honestly feel, like I said in my Golden Globes video, that this was Jennifer Lawrence's best performance in a David O. Russell film, and without her, the film would have been nowhere near as good. Best Director, this is a very solid list. I was surprised at first to see Adam McKay in here for The Big Short, but then, you know, thinking about it and the fact that I put it on my 10 best films of the year, and the fact that it's gotten a lot of high praise from critics, really speaks volumes as to how good that movie is, and that he is very well deserving of such a nomination. Because Adam McKay is one of the last guys you would have expected to see get nominated for a major award like this, because up until he directed The Big Short, Adam McKay mainly directed Will Ferrell comedies, both really good ones like Anchorman, and really bad ones like Step Brothers. Ugh, Step Brothers, one of the worst movies I have ever seen. I never want to see that movie again. But The Big Short, I wouldn't mind watching that movie hundreds of times more. But there are two directors who I'm very shocked did not make this list in some way. One, of course, is George Miller for Mad Max Fury Road, and the other is Tom McCarthy for Spotlight. You know, those two have been getting nominations practically everywhere in film critics circles and other award shows, including even recently the Directors Guild of America Awards. But I won't be making a video about that because I don't have the time. So the fact that they're not nominated here, it's very surprising and puzzling. And, you know, I think, and actually kind of insulting, because they worked so hard to make those films what they were, and I think they deserve every recognition they can get. But I'm at at least relieved that Ridley Scott is here for The Martian, because as you all know, The Martian was my #1 film of 2015. I loved absolutely everything about it, and The Martian signifies that Ridley Scott truly is one of the best directors of all time. And then finally, Best Picture. You know, for many, many years, the Oscars had a tradition of only having 5 nominees for Best Picture. But then in 2009, they decided to increase the number of Best Pictures to be anywhere from 5 to 10 to allow more films the chance to compete. Because there's always the complaints of, oh, this movie got shut out, that movie got shut out. I'm surprised the BAFTAs hasn't followed in the Oscars' footsteps, because they still only have 5 nominees for Best Picture. And these nominees are all excellent and well-deserving in their own way, but because there are only 5 nominees, there are several films that could have been here and should have been here, but are not, like Mad Max Fury Road, The Martian, Star Wars The Force Awakens, Inside Out, The Hateful Eight, Brooklyn. You get the picture. You know, I just wish the BAFTAs would follow in the Oscars' footsteps of allowing more films to compete. I know some voters might grumble, oh, but then that means I have more movies to watch. Well, if you're a responsible voter, you'd have been watching the movies as they were coming out, or as the DVD screeners were sent to you in the mail. At least that's what the responsible Oscar voters do. And I know there are many, and I'm sure there are many responsible BAFTA voters who do exactly that as well. But yeah, BAFTAs, please in the future, modify your rules to allow more films to compete for Best Picture. Well, those are all my thoughts for the BAFTA nominations. If you're interested in the BAFTAs, let me know in the comments section below what you think of the nominations and what you'd like to see win. And check back in the future for my Razzie and Oscar nomination reactions. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye!